A true archaeological treasure is preserved in the old collection of the University Library of Seville, which is a bibliographic jewel. They are the 7 volumes of the Antichità of Ercolano, the Antiquities of Herculaneum, which presented to a select public the main archaeological pieces that had been obtained in the excavations of the 3 great sites of Pompeii, Stabiae, and above all, Herculaneum.
There were 8 volumes published under the generic title Antichità di Herculano Esposte. The Antiquities of Herculaneum, on display. The Sevillian books, which lack the last volume, entered the University Library in 1889 from the distribution by the Spanish state of the rich library of the Ducal House of Osuna. They must have originally been gifts from King Carlos III to Pedro Tellez Giron, 8th Duke of Osuna. His death in 1787 and the monarchs the next year might explain the missing 8th volume, published in 1792.
It was in the year 79 AD, when Emperor Titus came to power, the brutal eruption of Vesuvius took place, burying in a sea of mud, sludge and ashes the flourishing cities of Pompeii, Herculaneum, and Stabiae, located on the slopes of Mount Vesuvius.
In 1738, the Bourbon excavations at Herculaneum, promoted by King Charles VII of Naples, began. After the death without descendants of his brother Ferdinand VI in 1759, he left the Kingdom of Naples to occupy the Kingdom of Spain as King Charles III, leaving his son Ferdinand IV. Already in Spain, weekly, from Naples, the king was informed of the discoveries through the minister Bernardo Tanucci, at the same time that he was receiving the published volumes of the Antiquities of Herculaneum exposed. Plaster copies of some of the main sculptures discovered, such as the important series found in the excavation of the Villa of the Papyri in Herculaneum, were also sent to Madrid. A selection of them is currently on display in the Museum of the Royal Academy of Fine Arts of San Fernando, in Madrid. The archaeological works in Herculaneum were directed by the Spanish military engineer Roque Joaquin de Alcubierre, who was working on the construction of a new royal palace in Portici.
At the beginning of the century, 18 Alcubierre, the director of the Bourbon excavations, took advantage of the existence of a pre-existing well, the so-called Nocerino well, to begin the excavations of the theater of Herculaneum. There, in that well, some statues had already appeared at the beginning of the century.
Later, ventilation shafts and ramps would be built for the access of operators and the removal of sculptural, architectural and epigraphic pieces, as well as other materials. The excavations at Pompeii, which began in 1748, were an easier task, as the remains were not at such a depth and were only covered by volcanic ash. The following year, the excavations of the territory of Stabiae commenced. Alcubierre's work was continued by the Swiss Carlos Weber and later by the Spaniard Francisco de la Vega. Consequently, a very considerable number of wall paintings, statues, small bronzes, and an infinity of other archaeological materials were meticulously extracted from the ruins. This led, in 1758, to the creation of the Herculanense Museum in the Portici Palace, where the remains stayed until their 19th century transfer to the Naples Archaeological Museum. Thanks to archaeological discoveries, the monarchy of Naples and Sicily acquired international fame throughout Europe in the 18th century. A few years earlier, the Royal Academy of Herculaneum had been created with the main purpose of rationalizing the study and publication of volumes dedicated to archaeological antiquities. The Academy's quality is clear from the first volume, printed in 1757 at the Royal Neapolitan Press under the title La Antichità di Ercolano Esposte. A few years earlier, Octavio Antonio Bayardi had published a catalogue of the ancient monuments of Herculaneum, a work that is also in the library of the University of Seville, which included the description of 732 archaeological pieces, but had little success. The first 5 volumes of the Antiquities of Herculaneum were devoted to the paintings and included some magnificent engravings which, apart from the accompanying studies, constituted the most outstanding aspect of the edition. Despite the generic title, not only materials from Herculaneum were included, although they were then the most outstanding, but also from Pompeii and the villas of Stabiae.
The 5 volumes of paintings included 324 plates of engravings, but by the 1770s, 1,400 paintings had been extracted from Herculaneum and Pompeii excavations. The subjects were diverse, including still lifes, landscapes, topics related to divinities, mythology, architecture, and a very prominent ornamental repertoire was also included to fill in the pages. The selection of the motifs was therefore thematic, and within them a stylistic criterion was followed, without taking into account the places, the contexts of appearance. It was therefore a historical artistic approach of that time, enlightened, which did not correspond to a current archaeological approach.
Among the landscapes we can highlight from those of sacroidyllic character and those of maritime scenes or port environments, to others more singular for their exoticism, such as the Nilotic landscapes. More outstanding are the representations of divinities and heroes, which generally form part of more complex mythological scenes. Among the former we can mention Mercury, Bacchus, Apollo, or Fortuna. Among the latter heroes such as Hercules, Theseus, or Achilles. Other figures appear isolated, such as muses, nymphs, or maenads, or erotic scenes of Bacchic character. Sometimes they hold great documentary value, like the series of Isiac ceremonies.
The architectures and the ornamental repertoire were of great importance for already at the end of the 19th century, what we know as the 4 styles of Pompeian painting. On the other hand, the genre scenes refer, for example, to everyday life, both public and private, and thus depict scenes in the forum, scenes of the education of young people, hunting scenes, etc., etc., which also illustrate us in an exceptional way as a historical document.
From these volumes onwards, the interest and study of Roman mural painting developed in European art, as the corpus of what was little known until then was considerably enlarged. Among them we should highlight, for example, the pictorial decorations of the Domus Aurea, in Rome, discovered centuries before. The main bronzes are collected in volumes V and 6. In the first one, a total of 50 busts have been selected to appear in 76 plates of engravings. The statuettes of divinities and Lauriae are collected, highlighting then the series of Greek philosophers Epicurus, Pseudo-Seneca, and the engraving identified with the poetess Sappho. Also on display are busts of illustrious historical figures such as Scipio Africanus, or even members of the imperial family such as Augustus, Livia, Gaius, and Lucius Caesars or Agrippina the Great, among others. Singular is the set of engravings identified as Hellenistic kings of Egypt, kings and princesses of the Ptolemies, or athletes or famous works of Greek art, such as the Doryphorus. Although many of those identifications of historical characters are logically erroneous, they do demonstrate the interest of Neapolitan scholars and the state of knowledge at that time. Also outstanding is the 6th volume, dedicated to the bronze statues, which includes 99 plates of engravings corresponding to 190 pieces. Along with the bronzes of the domestic lararium, the great statuary programs of 3 Herculaneum environments stand out: the theatre, the so-called basilica, and the villa of the papyri.
In the case of the Theatre of Herculaneum, 2 bronze statues that were discovered during the excavation and that represent prominent figures of the city stand out. They are part of a highly significant collection of equestrian figures in gilded bronze and other statues that comprise the ornamental programs of this scenic building.
The Basilica of Herculaneum is actually a sanctuary of imperial worship or Augusteum. From here came outstanding imperial sculptures, illustrated in the engravings, which today are in the Archaeological Museum of Naples. It is an imperial gallery with representations of Augustus, Tiberius, Claudius or Nero, and some empresses. Finally, the Villa of the Papyri includes a large series of bronze statues of ideal or mythological character, highlighting the representations of athletes and some divinities.
Despite the absence of archaeological aspects, such as the lack of interest in the places and contexts of discovery, the work, the Antichità of Ercolano, stands as one of the most important works of archaeology and history of ancient art of the 18th century. The importance of the work lies not only in the artistic quality of the illustrations, but also because it exposed to the public the most important results of the archaeological excavations in those interesting places. It was also a state-of-the-art of the comprehensive knowledge and detailed study of Roman antiquities during that period.
The edition of the series of volumes was carried out at the Neapolitan Royal Press, created by the king in 1748 to promote the publication of the discovered pieces. Along with the printing press, a school of engravers was organized with an important number of artists who carried out the designs and plates published in the Herculaneum Antiquities. Due to the success of the work, smaller, lower quality but more economical editions were produced in Rome and in other European countries. Later, during the 19th century, those designs emanating from Naples would serve for the development of the artistic and decorative fashion of the so-called Pompeian style. Originally, the project included the edition of 40 volumes, but only 8 were published.
The discovery of Herculaneum, Pompeii, and Stabiae marked a significant turning point in the history of archaeology and archaeological excavations. Those important archaeological works served to create a general awareness of the importance of the context of use. If until then the pieces had been valued mainly from an aesthetic point of view, from now on the importance of the study and knowledge of the archaeological site is emphasized, something fundamental for the archaeological discipline. The volumes of the Antiquities of Herculaneum, with their magnificent engravings, the erudite studies of the pieces and their exquisite edition, meant, on the one hand, a fundamental pillar for the development of neoclassicism, and on the other, a tribute to Charles III, sometimes called the Archaeologist King, for being the driving force behind such an important project.